Welcome back to Hey Friday. Tonight, we journey into one of the greatest adventures ever told, a tale of courage, cunning, and the unbreakable desire to return home. The story of a man who refused to surrender, no matter how far fate carried him from home. So, sit back and let us sail into the ancient world of gods and legends. This is the adventures of Odysseus. The fires of Troy burned high into the night. Smoke drifted across the dark sky as once proud palaces collapsed into heaps of glowing stone. The cries of victory echoed through the ruined streets, while weary Greek soldiers gathered their treasures before returning to the waiting ships. For 10 long years, they had fought beneath these walls. Kings had fallen. Heroes had risen. Thousands had lost their lives. Now the war was finally over. Standing upon the shore, Odysseus looked back one last time at the city that had consumed a decade of his life. He remembered the day he had first left Ithaca. His son, Telemachus, had been only an infant. His wife, Penelope, had stood upon the cliffs, watching as his ship disappeared beyond the horizon. Now 10 long years had passed. His son was now a young man he scarcely knew. His wife had spent a decade waiting for a husband who might never return. More than glory or riches, Odysseus desired only to see them again. As dawn broke over the sea, 12 black ships unfurled their crimson sails and departed from Troy. A favorable wind filled the canvas. The sailors laughed and sang, believing the worst was behind them. None knew that their true trials were only beginning. Days later, the fleet reached the land of the Sicanies, fierce warriors who lived along the coast of Thrace. Seeing a wealthy city, the Greeks launched a swift attack. The defenders were overwhelmed. Treasure filled the ships. Wine flowed freely. The soldiers celebrated, believing victory followed them wherever they sailed. But Odysseus warned his men, "We have taken enough. Gather what we need and return to the ships before more warriors arrive." Many ignored him. After years of hardship, they wanted one final celebration. They feasted. They drank. They laughed without caution. Then, as the sun climbed higher, horns echoed across the plains. Reinforcements. Hundreds of Ciconian warriors thundered toward the city in chariots, armed with spears and shields. The Greeks scrambled into formation. The battle was fierce. Spears darkened the sky. Bronze shields rang beneath heavy blows. One by one, Odysseus watched his companions fall. Though they eventually escaped to their ships, the victory had become a painful defeat. Several men from every vessel had been killed. As the fleet sailed away, Odysseus stared silently across the waves. Already, the price of carelessness had been paid. Soon after, dark clouds gathered over the sea. The winds howled with unnatural fury. Towering waves crashed against the ships, scattering the fleet across the open waters. For days they drifted, unable to find their course. Many believed the gods themselves had turned against them. At last, the storm faded. Ahead lay a peaceful island unlike any they had seen. Soft green hills rolled beneath a bright blue sky. Wildflowers danced in the breeze. Gentle streams flowed through quiet forests. The weary sailors rejoiced. Surely, they thought, fortune had finally smiled upon them. Odysseus sent a small group ashore to search for food and fresh water. The explorers soon met the island's strange inhabitants. These people offered no weapons, no threats, only sweet golden fruit known as the lotus. The exhausted sailors accepted the gift. One bite, then another. Almost instantly, every memory of home began to fade. They forgot Troy. They forgot Ithaca. They forgot their families waiting across the sea. Only perfect peace remained. Why return home? Why struggle against storms and monsters? Here, there was no sorrow, no fear, no responsibility, only endless contentment. When a scouting party failed to return, Odysseus went ashore himself. He found his companions resting happily among the flowers, smiling as though every care had vanished from the world. "Come," Odysseus ordered. "We must return to the ships." But the men simply laughed. "We have found paradise," they answered. "There is nothing beyond this island worth seeking." At once, Odysseus understood the danger. This island did not imprison men with chains. It imprisoned them with comfort. Ignoring their protests, he and his loyal sailors dragged the Lotus Eaters back to the ships by force. Some struggled. Some begged to stay forever. But Odysseus ordered them bound beneath the benches until the island disappeared beyond the horizon. Only then did the strange enchantment slowly fade. The lesson was clear. Not every danger came with claws or swords. Some arrived as temptation. After many more days upon the sea, the fleet reached a rugged coast unlike any before. Towering cliffs rose above crashing waves. Dark caves opened along the rocky shoreline. Huge flocks of sheep grazed peacefully across green meadows. There were no city walls, no harbors, no fields of grain, only silence. Odysseus felt both curiosity and caution. Leaving most of his crew behind, he chose 12 trusted companions and entered the largest cave, carrying gifts of wine. Inside, they discovered baskets overflowing with cheese. Milk filled great wooden bowls. Lambs and young goats wandered freely. His companions urged him to seize the food and leave before the owner returned. But Odysseus wished to meet whoever lived there. It was a decision he would later regret. As evening fell, the ground began to tremble. A gigantic shadow blocked the cave entrance. The owner had returned. He was no ordinary man. He was Polyphemus, one of the fearsome Cyclopes. He stood taller than the tallest tree. His massive arms could lift boulders that dozens of men could not move. At the center of his forehead glared a single enormous eye. Without effort, the giant rolled a stone across the cave entrance. A stone so enormous that even all of Odysseus' men together could never move it. The trap had closed. Polyphemus lit a fire. Its glow revealed the frightened strangers. "Who are you?" the giant thundered. "We are travelers returning from Troy," Odysseus replied. "We ask only for the sacred hospitality that all civilized people offer strangers." The Cyclops laughed. "I care nothing for your customs." Then, before anyone could react, he seized 2 sailors. Like a wolf devouring lambs, he dashed them upon the rocks and ate them alive. The cave echoed with screams. The survivors stood frozen in horror. That night, none slept. Odysseus considered killing the monster while he rested. But he realized the terrible truth. Only the Cyclops could move the great stone sealing the cave. If the giant died now, they would all remain trapped forever. So Odysseus waited, and he began to think. The next morning, Polyphemus ate 2 more men before leading his sheep out to pasture, sealing the cave behind him once again. All day Odysseus searched for a way to escape. Then he found a massive olive wood staff inside the cave. An idea formed. His men sharpened one end into a deadly point and hid it beneath burning embers. When evening came, Polyphemus returned and devoured 2 more sailors. Then Odysseus approached him with a skin of powerful wine taken from Troy. "Drink," Odysseus said. "It is a gift." The Cyclops had never tasted wine so rich. He drank deeply, again and again. Soon his speech became heavy. His great eye drooped with sleep. Laughing drunkenly, he asked, "Tell me your name, little man." Odysseus smiled. "My name is Nobody." The giant roared with laughter. "Then, Nobody, I shall eat you last." Moments later, the monster collapsed into a deep sleep. Odysseus gave the signal. Together, the surviving Greeks thrust the sharpened stake into the fire until its tip glowed red-hot. With every ounce of strength they possessed, they drove it into the Cyclops' single eye. Polyphemus awoke with a scream that shook the mountain. He stumbled wildly through the cave, clutching his ruined face. His cries brought the neighboring Cyclopes running. "What has happened?" they shouted from outside. "Who attacks you?" Polyphemus bellowed in agony. "Nobody is killing me." The other Cyclopes fell silent. "If nobody is harming you," they answered, "then your suffering must come from the gods." Believing no enemy was present, they walked away. Odysseus' cleverness had succeeded, yet escape still remained impossible. The giant blocked the entrance at dawn, feeling each sheep as it passed to catch the hidden Greeks. Again, Odysseus devised a plan. He tied each man beneath the thick wool of the giant's largest rams. As the sheep filed out of the cave, Polyphemus felt only their backs. One by one, the Greeks slipped safely into the open air. Odysseus himself clung beneath the largest ram until he, too, reached freedom. The survivors raced toward their waiting ship. As the oars struck the sea, relief swept over the exhausted crew. They had escaped what seemed certain death. But as the ship pulled away, pride overcame wisdom. Unable to remain silent, Odysseus shouted back across the waves, "Cyclops, if anyone asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus, king of Ithaca." The giant's face twisted with rage. He lifted an enormous boulder and hurled it toward the fleeing ship. The stone crashed into the sea just behind them, raising a wave that nearly carried the vessel back to shore. Then Polyphemus stretched his hands toward the heavens and cried out, "Hear me, Father Poseidon, if truly I am your son, let Odysseus never reach his home. And if fate allows him to return, let him arrive alone, after long years of suffering, having lost all his companions." The sea fell strangely silent. Far below the waves, the god of the sea had heard his son's prayer. Odysseus did not yet know it, but from that moment onward, the oceans themselves would become his greatest enemy. The curse of the Cyclops lingered over the sea like a gathering storm. Though the skies appeared calm and the winds carried the ships steadily forward, Odysseus could not forget the words Polyphemus had cried to the heavens. "Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea, if the Lord of the oceans truly sought revenge, then every wave, every storm, and every hidden reef would become an enemy." Still, hope remained. The 12 ships sailed onward beneath clear blue skies. Days turned into weeks, and at last a strange island rose from the horizon. High cliffs encircled its shores, while a magnificent bronze palace stood upon its highest peak. This was the floating island of Aeolus, keeper of all the winds. Unlike many lands they had visited, the people welcomed the weary travelers with open arms. King Aeolus listened with great interest as Odysseus recounted the 10-year war at Troy, the terrible Cyclops, and the long voyage home. For an entire month, the king treated the Greeks as honored guests. Their ships were repaired. Their stores were replenished. Their hearts grew lighter. When at last it came time to depart, Aeolus wished to aid the clever king. Calling Odysseus into his great hall, he presented him with a large leather bag bound tightly with silver cord. "This," Aeolus said, "contains every wild and dangerous wind that blows across the sea. Only one gentle west wind remained free to guide the ships safely toward Ithaca. Guard this bag carefully," the king warned. "Do not allow anyone to open it until you reach your homeland." Odysseus bowed with gratitude. With such a gift, surely their troubles were ending. The fleet sailed swiftly across peaceful waters. Day after day, the wind carried them closer to home. Then, one evening, Odysseus climbed to the stern of his ship. Far in the distance, he saw something that made his heart race. The mountains of Ithaca. Smoke rose from familiar villages. The coastline of his beloved kingdom shimmered beneath the setting sun. They had done it. After 10 long years, home was finally within reach. Exhausted beyond measure, Odysseus allowed himself a brief sleep. It was the first time in many days that he had closed his eyes. But among the crew, whispers began to spread. "Our king guards that leather bag day and night. It must be filled with gold or silver, perhaps treasures taken from Troy that he refuses to share." Jealousy clouded their judgment. While Odysseus slept, several sailors quietly untied the silver cord. The instant the knot loosened, the imprisoned winds burst free with deafening fury. The sea exploded into chaos. Hurricane-force gales smashed against the fleet. The ships spun helplessly through monstrous waves. The coastline of Ithaca vanished into darkness as the storm drove them farther and farther away. Odysseus awoke to the screams of his men. The precious bag lay empty. His heart sank. So close. They had been only hours from home. Because of greed and mistrust, everything had been lost. For many days, the relentless storm carried them back across the sea until, battered and exhausted, they found themselves once more at the island of Aeolus. Odysseus begged the Wind King for help, but Aeolus looked upon him with sorrow. "If the gods have driven you away," he said quietly, "then I dare not oppose their will." He refused them shelter. The ships departed once more. Now they sailed without divine protection, without favor, without hope. For 6 more days they crossed endless waters until another coastline appeared. Unlike the peaceful island of Aeolus, this land felt unnaturally silent. Steep cliffs surrounded a narrow harbor. The water inside lay perfectly still. Only Odysseus felt uneasy. Rather than anchor inside the enclosed harbor with the other ships, he secured his own vessel outside, tying it to a rocky cliff where it could quickly escape if danger appeared. It was a decision that would save his life. A scouting party entered the island. They soon encountered a gigantic woman drawing water from a spring. She was taller than any human. Without speaking, she pointed them toward an enormous palace. Inside sat her husband, King Antiphates. He was no ordinary ruler. He was one of the Laestrygonians, a race of giant cannibals. The moment he saw the strangers, he seized one of them and devoured him where he stood. The remaining scouts fled in terror. Their cries echoed through the valley. Instantly, thousands of giants poured from the surrounding hills. Each carried boulders larger than wagons. They rushed toward the harbor. The trapped Greek ships had nowhere to flee. Great stones crashed down from the cliffs, shattering hulls into splinters. The sea turned white with broken masts. Men leapt into the water, only to be speared like fish or seized by the giants. The Laestrygonians feasted upon them without mercy. From a ship outside the harbor, Odysseus watched in horror. 11 ships, destroyed. Hundreds of loyal companions, gone forever. Without hesitation, he cut the ropes, securing his vessel. His single remaining ship fled into the open sea while the giants roared with frustration behind them. Where once 12 proud ships had sailed from Troy, only one remained. The weight of leadership grew heavier than ever. Every loss rested upon Odysseus' heart. Many days later, the lonely ship reached a lush island covered with thick forests and flowering valleys. Smoke rose peacefully above distant trees. The place seemed almost welcoming. Odysseus divided his remaining crew into 2 groups. One would remain with the ship. The other, led by his trusted companion Eurylochus, would explore the island. Deep within the woods, they discovered a magnificent stone palace surrounded by lions and wolves. Yet something was strange. The wild beasts did not attack. Instead, they wagged their tails like gentle dogs, welcoming the strangers. Inside, a beautiful woman sang as she worked at a golden loom. Her name was Circe. She greeted the weary sailors with kindness, inviting them to feast. All entered the palace except cautious Eurylochus, who remained outside. The men ate gladly, but the food was enchanted. The moment they finished, Circe touched them lightly with her wand. Before their horrified eyes, their hands became hooves. Their voices became squeals. Their bodies transformed into pigs. Only their minds remained human. Laughing softly, Circe herded them into a pen. Eurylochus fled back to the shore in terror. "My king," he gasped, "everyone is gone. A witch has turned them into beasts." Though fear gripped every man aboard, Odysseus knew he could not abandon his companions. Alone, he walked toward the palace. Along the forest path, a young traveler suddenly appeared. His eyes gleamed with unusual wisdom. It was the god Hermes disguised as a mortal. "The woman you seek is dangerous," Hermes warned, "but the gods have not abandoned you." He handed Odysseus a mysterious white-flowered herb called moly. "No spell can overcome one who carries this. When Circe offers her enchanted drink, accept it. When she strikes you with her wand, her magic will fail. Then draw your sword. Only then will she free your men." Thanking the god, Odysseus continued onward. Everything happened exactly as Hermes foretold. Circe smiled warmly. She offered food and wine. Odysseus drank. She raised her wand. "Become a pig," she commanded. Nothing happened. Her eyes widened in disbelief. In one swift motion, Odysseus drew his bronze sword. Circe stepped backward in fear. "You are no ordinary man," she whispered. "You must be Odysseus." Realizing she faced a hero protected by the gods, Circe surrendered. She restored every sailor to human form. Not only were they human again, but they appeared younger and stronger than before. Ashamed of her deception, Circe begged forgiveness. Odysseus accepted. The lonely travelers remained upon her island. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The comfort they found after so much suffering slowly dulled their desire to continue. Nearly a full year passed before the crew approached their king. "Odysseus," they said gently, "have you forgotten Ithaca? Our families still wait. Our homes still stand beyond the sea." Their words struck his heart. Once again, he longed for home. Circe understood. She did not try to stop him. Instead, she revealed the greatest challenge yet. "If you wish to reach Ithaca," she said, "you must first journey where no living man wishes to go. You must sail to the land of the dead. There, you must seek the blind prophet Tiresias. Only he can reveal the path that leads safely home." A chill passed through every sailor. To sail willingly into the realm of death seemed impossible. Yet there was no other choice. Following Circe's instructions, the lone black ship crossed a sea shrouded in endless mist. The sun itself seemed to disappear. The air grew colder. Not even birds dared fly above those waters. At last, they reached the edge of the world, where the rivers of the underworld met beneath a sky without stars. Here, Odysseus dug a deep trench into the earth. He poured offerings of milk, honey, wine, water, and the blood of sacrificed sheep, just as Circe had instructed. Almost immediately, shadows emerged from the darkness. Countless spirits drifted toward the trench. The dead, men and women from forgotten ages. Warriors still bearing the wounds that had killed them. Their silent faces surrounded the living king. Odysseus stood firm, sword in hand, allowing none to drink the blood until the prophet arrived. Then, through the endless crowd, an old blind man approached. Though sightless in life, his spirit seemed to see everything. It was Tiresias. He drank from the sacred offering and raised his head. "Odysseus, I know why you have come. You seek your home. You shall reach Ithaca, but only after terrible suffering. The sea god Poseidon will never cease pursuing you. Your companions will perish. You alone will survive. And when you finally reach your palace, you will find strangers feasting in your halls. They consume your wealth. They seek your wife. But if your courage does not fail, you shall reclaim your kingdom." The prophet's words echoed through the darkness. Odysseus had found the guidance he sought. But every step toward home would demand an even greater sacrifice than before. Beyond the black waters of the underworld, new terrors awaited. Songs that lured sailors to their doom, monsters that guarded the narrow seas, and a choice that would cost him every remaining companion. The cold winds of the underworld faded behind them. As Odysseus' lone ship sailed back into the world of the living, every man remained silent. The words of the prophet Tiresias weighed heavily upon their hearts. The journey home was far from over. Their greatest trials still lay ahead. Finally, Circe spoke of one last warning. "When you reach the island of the sun god Helios, you will see beautiful cattle grazing upon green fields. Do not harm them. They are sacred, even if hunger consumes you. Even if death seems certain. Touch them, and destruction will follow." With these final words, Circe supplied the ship with food and fresh water. At sunrise, the last surviving crew sailed onward. Days later, a strange melody drifted across the sea. It was soft at first, then sweeter than birdsong, more beautiful than the sound of flowing rivers. Every sailor paused. The music seemed to whisper directly into their hearts. It promised forgotten dreams, lost loved ones, perfect happiness. The Sirens had begun their song. Following Circe's advice, Every sailor filled his ears with warm beeswax until no sound could enter. Only Odysseus wished to hear the legendary voices. He had ordered his men to bind him tightly to the ship's mast. No matter what I say, he had warned them, do not untie me, even if I beg, even if I threaten you. The music grew louder. Soon the Sirens appeared upon their rocky island. Their voices floated across the water like living magic. Odysseus, they sang, great conqueror of Troy, come to us. We know every secret. We know every story. We know the future. No man leaves our shores without becoming wiser. The sound pierced his soul. Odysseus struggled against the ropes. Turn the ship, he cried. Please, we must go to them. His sailors rowed harder. Unable to hear his desperate pleas, they tightened the ropes around him exactly as he had commanded. The Sirens' voices became almost unbearable. For one terrible moment, Odysseus believed he would lose his mind. Then, the music faded. The island disappeared behind the horizon. The spell was broken. Exhausted, Odysseus lowered his head. Once again, wisdom had triumphed over temptation. Ahead lay the narrow strait. Dark cliffs rose on either side. The sea itself seemed uneasy. Odysseus remembered Circe's warning. He did not tell his crew about Scylla. He feared panic would destroy them before the monster ever appeared. Instead, he quietly guided the ship toward the cliff. The waters beside Charybdis already churned with terrifying force. Great circles spun endlessly upon the sea. The whirlpool inhaled the ocean with a roar like thunder. Entire trees floated into its mouth and vanished forever. The crew stared in horror. Every eye remained fixed upon the whirlpool. No one looked toward the cliffs. That was when Scylla struck. 6 enormous necks shot from the darkness faster than arrows. 6 monstrous jaws snapped shut. 6 sailors screamed as they were lifted high into the air. Odysseus reached for his spear. But Circe had spoken the truth. No mortal could fight Scylla. The monster disappeared into her cave with its victims before anyone could strike. The remaining sailors watched helplessly as the cries of their companions faded into silence. The ship escaped the strait, but the cost was terrible. Odysseus stood at the stern, grief filling his heart. A king could command men. He could inspire courage. But sometimes, he could not save everyone. Soon another island appeared. Its green meadows stretched beneath a brilliant sun. Hundreds of magnificent cattle grazed peacefully across the hills. Not a single animal wandered. Not one ever became lost. They belonged to Helios, the sun god. Odysseus gathered his weary crew. Listen carefully. These cattle are sacred. No one is to touch them. We will remain only long enough to rest before continuing our voyage. Every man agreed. For many days, favorable weather allowed them to remain safely ashore. Then the skies darkened. A violent storm swept across the sea. Day after day, hurricane winds trapped them upon the island. Their supplies dwindled. Fresh water became scarce. Soon hunger began to torment the exhausted sailors. Odysseus prayed constantly to the gods for deliverance. One afternoon, worn out from worry, he climbed into the hills to pray alone. Sleep overtook him beneath an ancient tree. While their captain slept, the desperate crew gathered together. Eurylochus, the same loyal companion who had once escaped Circe's palace, spoke sadly. "My friends," he said, "death comes in many forms. Would you rather starve here like animals, or offer one sacrifice to the gods and preserve your lives?" The starving men looked toward the sacred cattle. Reason gave way to desperation. They slaughtered the finest animals and prepared a great feast. The aroma of roasted meat filled the island. When Odysseus awoke, he smelled smoke upon the wind. His heart sank. He rushed back to the camp. The sacred cattle already lay butchered upon ground. "No," he whispered. "What have you done?" Even as the meat cooked over the fire, strange signs appeared. The hides crawled across the earth. The roasted flesh seemed to move upon the spits. The heads of the slaughtered cattle bellowed, as though still alive. Every sailor froze in terror. Far above the clouds, Helios witnessed the destruction. Enraged, He demanded justice from Zeus himself. "If these men go unpunished," the sun god declared, "I shall no longer shine upon the world." Zeus answered with a solemn nod. Justice would come. At last, the storm ended. The crew hurried aboard their ship and left the cursed island behind. For a short time, calm seas returned. Then, dark clouds gathered with unnatural speed. Lightning split the heavens. The ocean erupted beneath them. A single thunderbolt crashed directly into the ship. The mast shattered. The sails burst into flames. The vessel broke apart beneath the tremendous force. One by one, every remaining companion was swallowed by the sea. Odysseus alone survived. Clinging to fragments of the broken mast, he drifted helplessly upon the waves. For 9 endless days, the sea carried him wherever Poseidon desired. On the 10th day, he found himself once again near the dreaded Charybdis. The monstrous whirlpool swallowed the wreckage beneath him. At the last possible moment, Odysseus leapt upward and clung to the branches of a wild fig tree growing from the cliff. Below him, the sea vanished into the monster's endless mouth. He waited. At last Charybdis spewed the waters back into the open sea. The floating timbers returned. Odysseus dropped from the tree onto the drifting wreckage and escaped once more. Alone, every friend who had sailed with him from Troy was gone. The prophecy of Tiresias had come true. For many days, the lonely king drifted across the endless sea until gentle waves carried him to a hidden island of extraordinary beauty. Crystal waterfalls flowed through lush forests. Birds sang beneath flowering trees. A peaceful cave overlooked the sparkling sea. There lived the immortal nymph Calypso. She found the exhausted hero lying unconscious upon the shore. With kindness, she carried him into her home. She healed his wounds, fed him, cared for him. As the years passed, Calypso fell deeply in love with Odysseus. She begged him to remain forever. "I can make you immortal," she promised. "You will never grow old. You will never know pain again. You will live beside me forever." Many men would have accepted without hesitation. But every evening, Odysseus walked alone to the shore. He gazed across the endless sea toward the distant homeland he could not see. His thoughts never left Penelope or Ithaca. Year after year, he wept beside the waves. At last, the goddess Athena took pity on her favorite hero. She pleaded before Zeus. "Enough. Odysseus has suffered long enough." Zeus agreed. He sent Hermes to Calypso's island. Though heartbroken, the nymph obeyed the command of the king of the gods. She helped Odysseus build a sturdy raft. She filled it with food, fresh water, and warm clothing. Then she watched silently as the man she loved sailed away forever. For 17 peaceful days, Odysseus crossed the open sea. Then Poseidon returned from distant lands. The sea god spotted the tiny raft. His anger flared once more. Towering waves rose toward the sky. Furious winds tore apart the fragile craft. Odysseus struggled desperately to stay alive. Just when hope seemed lost, a sea goddess appeared. She gave him a magical veil and said, "Trust the sea. Do not fear." Casting himself into the raging waters, Odysseus swam through crashing waves for 2 days and 2 nights. Bruised, bleeding, completely exhausted. Finally, he reached the shores of a distant kingdom. There, beneath the shade of olive trees, he collapsed into a deep sleep. The island belonged to the Phaeacians, a people beloved by the gods and unmatched in the art of sailing. For the first time in many years, Odysseus had reached a land where kindness, not danger, awaited him. And beyond this peaceful kingdom lay the final chapter of his incredible journey. His beloved Ithaca was closer than ever before. As dawn broke over the island of the Phaeacians, golden sunlight spread across the quiet shore, where Odysseus lay asleep beneath a cluster of olive trees. His body was scarred by countless battles. His hands were rough from years of rowing and war. His face bore the weight of 20 years of hardship. He no longer looked like the proud king who had sailed from Ithaca. He looked like a man who had survived the impossible. Soon, laughter echoed along the beach. The young princess Nausicaa, daughter of King Alcinous, had come with her attendants to wash clothes in the river. As they played with a brightly colored ball, it bounced into the water. The startled cries awakened Odysseus. Slowly he stepped from the bushes, covering himself with leafy branches. The attendants fled in fear. Only Nausicaa remained. Though frightened, she saw not a monster before her, but a weary traveler whose eyes carried both sorrow and dignity. Odysseus spoke gently. "Princess, I have suffered greatly upon the sea. I ask not for riches, only for clothing and the kindness shown to strangers." Moved by his humility, Nausicaa offered fresh garments, food, and directions to her father's palace. "There you will find people who honor the ancient law of hospitality," she said. "Tell my parents your story, and they will help you return home." Odysseus thanked her with deep gratitude. Once again, hope stirred within his heart. King Alcinous welcomed the stranger with a magnificent feast. That evening, musicians filled the great hall with songs celebrating the heroes of the Trojan War. One bar began to sing of the wooden horse, the clever trick that had brought mighty Troy to its knees. As the story unfolded, tears quietly rolled down Odysseus' face. He turned away, hoping no one would notice. But King Alcinous saw his hidden grief. "My friend," the king said softly, "only one who lived those events could weep as you do. Tell us your name." The hall fell silent. Odysseus slowly rose from his seat. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca." Gasps spread throughout the palace. The legendary hero stood before them. He then recounted every trial of his incredible voyage: the Cyclops, the Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, the enchantress Circe, the Underworld Calypso, and the countless companions he had lost along the way. The Phaeacians listened in stunned silence. When the tale was finished, King Alcinous stood and declared, "No man who has suffered as you have shall remain stranded another day." The finest ship in the kingdom was prepared. Its crew, renowned as the greatest sailors in the world, carried Odysseus across calm seas while he slept peacefully aboard. Before sunrise, they reached the rocky shores of Ithaca. Carefully, they laid the sleeping king upon the sand beside the treasures he had received. Without waking him, they quietly sailed away. After 20 years, Odysseus was finally home. When he awoke, the familiar hills stretched before him. Ancient olive trees swayed gently in the breeze. The scent of the sea carried memories from his youth. Yet, he did not recognize the land. The goddess Athena had hidden Ithaca beneath a veil of mist to protect him from his enemies. Appearing in the form of a young shepherd, she smiled knowingly. "Do you not recognize your own kingdom?" The mist slowly lifted. Odysseus fell to his knees. "Ithaca!" He kissed the earth with tears in his eyes. Athena then revealed the terrible truth. "While you wandered the seas, more than 100 noblemen have filled your palace. They consume your food, they waste your wealth, and every day they pressure your faithful wife, Penelope, to choose a new husband. They believe you are dead." Odysseus' joy turned instantly into determination. Athena touched him with her divine hand. His strong body became bent with age. His skin wrinkled. His hair turned gray. His royal clothing became ragged. Within moments, the mighty king had become an old beggar. "No one must know who you are," Athena warned. "Patience will win this battle." Odysseus first visited the humble hut of his loyal swineherd, Eumaeus. Though Eumaeus did not recognize his king, he welcomed the old beggar warmly. "Sit by my fire," he said. "Eat what little I have." Even the poorest man must show kindness to strangers. Odysseus smiled quietly. His faithful servant had remained noble despite years of hardship. Not long afterward, Telemachus returned from his own journey in search of news about his missing father. When Athena judged the moment right, she restored Odysseus' true appearance. Telemachus stared in disbelief. "No," he whispered. "It cannot be. My father." Odysseus embraced the son he had not seen since infancy. For a long time, neither spoke. Both wept. Together, they formed a plan. The palace would be reclaimed, not with an army, but with courage, patience, and justice. Meanwhile, inside the palace, chaos ruled. The suitors feasted every day. They slaughtered Odysseus' cattle, drank his finest wine, mocked his servants, and laughed openly at the thought that the true king would never return. Only Penelope remained steadfast. Though surrounded by arrogant men, she never stopped believing that somehow, somewhere, Odysseus still lived. To delay choosing a husband, she announced one final challenge. I shall marry the man who can string the great bow of Odysseus and send an arrow through 12 iron axe heads. The suitors laughed confidently. Surely such a task would be simple. One after another they stepped forward. The strongest warriors strained with all their might. Some grunted, some sweated, some could not even bend the bow. None could string it. Laughter faded into embarrassment. Then an old beggar stepped quietly into the hall. I would like to try. The suitors burst into mocking laughter. Old man, that bow is heavier than you are. Leave before you embarrass yourself. But Penelope, honoring the rights of every guest, allowed him to proceed. Telemachus placed the bow into the beggar's hands. Odysseus examined the weapon lovingly. His fingers remembered every curve of the polished wood. With effortless grace, he bent the bow. The string slipped perfectly into place. The hall fell silent. Then, he drew the arrow. It flew like lightning, passing cleanly through all 12 axe heads before striking the far wall. Not a single person moved. Slowly, Odysseus straightened his back. Athena removed his disguise. The old beggar vanished. In his place stood the true king of Ithaca. His eyes blazed with righteous fury. You dogs! He thundered. You believed I would never return. You devour my wealth. You dishonor my household. You sought to steal my wife. Now your judgment has come. Before anyone could react, Odysseus released another arrow. It struck the leader of the suitors straight through the throat. Panic exploded throughout the hall. The doors had already been barred. There would be no escape. Telemachus stood beside his father. Faithful Eumaeus joined them. A few loyal servants took up arms. The battle was fierce. Spears crashed against shields. Arrows flew across the great hall. Suitors charged desperately, but Athena herself watched over Odysseus, turning many of their weapons aside. One by one, the men who had abused the king's hospitality fell. At last, silence returned to the palace. The feast had ended. Justice had been done. When the fighting was over, Penelope descended from her chamber. She looked upon the man before her. He appeared exactly as she remembered. Yet 20 years had passed. Could this truly be her husband? Or was it another trick of the gods? She tested him. Quietly, she instructed a servant, "Move our marriage bed into the hall." Odysseus immediately replied, "No one can move that bed. I built it myself around the trunk of a living olive tree. The roots still grow beneath our home." Only Odysseus could have known that secret. Penelope's eyes filled with tears. She ran into his arms. For 20 years, she had waited. For 20 years, she had remained faithful. Now, at last, husband and wife were together again. Neither wished to let go. Peace slowly returned to Ithaca. Families mourned those who had fallen, yet they also welcomed the restoration of their rightful king. With Athena's guidance, the anger between the families of the suitors and the household of Odysseus was brought to an end, preventing another cycle of bloodshed. Odysseus once more ruled the island, not as the ambitious warrior who had sailed to Troy decades before, but as a wiser, humbler king shaped by suffering, loss, and perseverance. He had crossed seas haunted by monsters. He had outwitted giants and witches. He had resisted temptation, survived storms sent by the gods, and endured years of loneliness. Many stronger men had fallen where he had endured. His greatest weapon had never been his sword. It had been his wisdom, his patience, and his unwavering hope that one day he would see his home again. Thus ends the extraordinary voyage of Odysseus, one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. His story is not simply about monsters, gods, or epic battles. It is about the strength to keep moving forward when every path seems lost. It reminds us that intelligence can overcome brute force, that patience can triumph over anger, and that true courage is found not only on the battlefield, but in refusing to give up when the journey grows darkest. After 20 years of war and wandering, Odysseus finally returned to the place he had longed for every single day, his home. And perhaps that is why his story has endured for nearly 3,000 years. Because deep within every heart is the hope that no matter how long or difficult the journey, there's always a way back to the people and the place we love. Thank you for joining me on this unforgettable adventure. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Hey Friday, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next journey into the world's greatest legends and timeless tales. Until next time, take care, keep wondering, and keep the spirit of adventure alive.